Hello, lovely listeners. I've got the honour of speaking with Laura Belcher today. Laura empowers women to meet their potential and guides them to create their path towards happiness and wealth through their intrinsic passions. Laura is a business mentor and photographer. I'm a bit of a budding photographer myself, and I had a quick look at some of your photos on your website. Wow, really loved them. And Laura, on her bio, put she was designed to build other people's dreams, whether that's through capturing the most powerful image for a brand, a model, or mentoring people in their business. And it wasn't until Laura stood in her own power and believed she was enough when it came to her own wisdom and experience that true alignment happened in Laura's life. So I'm intrigued to hear how that came about. I'm so pleased to have you here. And as I said, I did have a quick look at your website, and yeah, I loved your photos. So colourful, and I've always wanted to try and achieve that. So yeah, over to you, Laura. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, firstly, Mel, for such a lovely, interesting, colourful introduction to me. I'm very, very grateful, and I'm really, really grateful for your space. And yeah, I really hope what I can bring can give value to your listeners. But yeah, I guess everything you just said is sort of just me laying everything bare, really, in terms of definitely who I've been and who I am now. Yeah, I don't know what you want me to share or what I
Well,
can like expand on for you, firstly.
yeah, I mean, I just love to hear my guests' sort of backstory. Maybe a bit about, you growing up, how you got into photography. I suppose that's the one of the big things. What sort of drove you as a younger woman, and how did you get to that point, obviously where you are now, where you had this I am enough, and
Yeah.
I can, because you've also got this big vision, of empowering 10 million women.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm going to do more, Mel. I've got
Oh.
something inside me. I think I'll do more. But yeah, so and I guess it's so funny, isn't it? I can feel my ego talking, and I'm like, no, it's from my heart. It is from my heart, but it is from a place of like utter passion. And well, thank you so much again for like wanting to hear and giving me space. But yeah, to sort of take it back and not sort of give you 32 years of life, which is how old I am now. For me, it started from such a place as a young girl where I always thought, I always looked at others and I always had something inside of me that thought, if that man can be rich and powerful and happy and have all these things, so can I. I always used to think we're all born the same. We're all born the same. We're all born the same. Later in my life, and in the last couple of years especially, I started to understand the concept of privilege and actually how privilege can be super invisible sometimes, which is why it's quite a weird topic and a strange thing to identify until you start speaking and listening to other stories and so on. So, I do understand now the how that can fold into the opportunities and the platforms we are placed on or we sit. But that's all I thought for as a very young girl. I always thought it, and I was gaslight quite a lot, I think, by adults because they used to sort of want to, place their fears or limitations on me and be like, oh, well, they've got this and they've got that and those things. And I was brought up in a very beautiful, provided for environment, but quite a lack around money mindset. I was very aware that we couldn't afford everything. I was very aware that, they could afford that and we couldn't. I always felt very much like we were working class and, and that was it really. And it's just weird because I also, at that very young age, couldn't cope with being put in a box. And what I mean by that is it's almost like, I think we sort of, well, we're born into it, aren't we? Because we're born into a ladder of supremacy and hierarchy. So, there is history, the placement of just men and women, for instance, and stuff like that. So we're all sort of placed in those situations, and for whatever you identify and whatever your lived experience is, you will have moments where you see where you just live, and then you find out, well, that's the way I'm going to be spoken to in that environment, or when I wear that, or that's what will happen when I do that. And then you start almost just accepting the world around us. And it's this whole concept that's obviously been brought forward recently around how we deal with the safety of women walking alone and stuff like that. And again, that's for another whole topic, but it's a very weird paradox, isn't it, when we remove ourselves out of it? And it's like, isn't it weird that we're still validating this problem as opposed to get it, and validating the symptoms as a getting like rooting it out and getting to the cause. And so this is sort of all the stuff I was faced with. And then I think you go into education, Mel, and that's where again you're putting boxes, because they're like, what subjects do you want to be good at, or what do you want to learn, or and I always used to question that, always. I was that annoying child. Every school report, honestly, it's so funny, Mel. It was like, Laura likes to debate. She likes to question everything. She likes to, because I always did. And so, yeah, and then I always as well had this feeling of, I felt almost caged. I almost used to fight for freedom against like that 9 to 5 stereotypical old type of older generational expectation of a woman's life. How the success story was to graduate, to get a good job, to find a good provider, to get married, to have a house, to have 3 children, and to live like that. That, Mel, was like, I knew from a young age, it was like I was fighting against it. It was something instinctively I was like, oh, well, that's not for me. And I couldn't figure it out. And I've got there now in the last year, and I understand it so much more clearer now, and can empower it as opposed to developing bad traits from it, I guess. But yeah, anyway, so it started in that place, and the only place I felt super free and I loved fully was performing. So skip to 22, and I had graduated with a musical theatre degree from London in a conservatoire. I was really grateful. I was very privileged in the environment that I worked in and the opportunities I was given. And then at 22, Mel, sort of when it started for me, I went and lived in Canada for a year. So I lived in Canada for a year, and as well, because I'll link in photography. I know you asked for it. So at 22, I go over to Canada. I spend a year there, and the sole purpose was to make it as a movie star and to be famous and to be seen and so on. And I was really, really like, I had a great lot of opportunities, and again, through a lot of privilege, really, of what is just placed on you as a white woman. And that's grown in an environment like London and studied in London. That holds privilege in the world. So yeah, I mean, I was definitely really lucky. Like, I worked on Warner Brothers a couple of sets and done a few like sort of like here and there parts. Nothing too like interesting, Mel, but I was very grateful. And I also played like a lead in a short film. I was in a music video. I went down to Vegas and actually worked as a showgirl for a bit down there.
Wow.
So all a bit crazy, really, and all a bit mental. And entwined with all of that, I used to model, because it sort of went hand in hand, it did. And again, the privilege game of understanding not what like understanding now, but like slim privilege, pretty privilege, all of this Western cultured life of what's correct and desired the most. I got more opportunities. But when I was in that, Mel, I always used to, and just skipping into that modeling bit, sometimes I would model for like photography workshops. And what's so funny, as you comment on my work, is that, and this is where it sort of come from really, is I used to just feel very passionate about creating frames. I used to feel very passionate about bringing stillness to like alive. I was very passionate about bringing that emotion through in an image, as opposed to a performative still. I always felt like that as a model. I wanted to give that to the photographer. So I almost used to, in reflection, mentor the photographer, Mel, when I used to say, well, if you get down low, I'll get up, and then I'm going to jump. And if you shoot, I mean, I didn't obviously understand like shutter speed and ISO and all of that stuff then, but I was also very, very inquisitive when I was young. I loved learning. And again, it went hand in hand with like challenging that status quo. I always ask questions. So if that's that and that's that, why is that? And what's that? And so at the time, I really enjoyed that aspect. It wasn't sort of there that I was just sort of taking on that role as a model. I really enjoyed like learning and what they were doing, and learning a little around lighting. And as well, it's helping me because I could be a better model for them if I understood lighting and things like that. So that's sort of, I guess, where the passion and interest come and grew as I got older and older. And like, because I did feel it then, I wasn't ready to be behind the camera, Mel. I was in front of it. You know what I mean? I was that child. So yeah, I got to that point in my life after doing that year, and I started to question.
Can I ask why Canada? Why Canada and not LA or whatever?
Well, it sort of links in. Firstly, because I could get a visa to go to Canada. It's quite a simple one. Very privileged in the UK as a Commonwealth country. They had like a year's working visa that was optional for us. I also understood that a lot come up from the LA, from the West Coast, from LA to Vancouver, because it sits directly above it, and it was cheaper to film up there for a lot of the production houses, so they would bring it up a lot. But again, hand in hand with what happened there, I really was, Mel, when I understand it now, like I was safe, but I don't want to gaslight my own experience, but I was sexualized a lot. I was objectified a lot. And I hated it. I hated the misogyny, because guess what? That little girl inside of me thought she could do anything, and she thought she could be as powerful as a man, or she thought she could be as rich as a man. And it's so weird. I used to think that, because again, you see how like ingrained we were that young, because I used to just think that, but I never realized, why wasn't I saying at that young, why don't I want to be as rich as a woman? I think we have evolved so much in the last 20 years, but I think when I was 10, 22 years ago, I probably did just see a lot more of that. You know, even at that point the internet wasn't here. We just got fed the information we were surrounded by, I guess, in our families and at school. So it was more about talking about wealth on a level of, it was a lot more men then, I guess. It must have been, but yeah. So you can imagine I didn't really enjoy that part. I was like, what's happening here? And it was weird, because the further I got up the ladder, the worse it got. And I'm sure it was all around the ladder, to be honest, but it really was overwhelming to be, you know, and I was a young woman at 22, like in those rooms where you were solely like pointed out, sexualized, objectified. And then what was the crazy thing is everyone in the room was almost jealous they weren't. So you're in this place of going, why am I here? Is it because of everything I look like, or is it my brain and what I do? And so anyway, I come home, I was like sort of reset, joined a gym, just working as a receptionist at the time. So I was a bit lost. Then I sort of thought, well, I don't want to be a part of this. And I thought, well, surely extrinsically, as I get higher up the ladder and get better jobs, I like it more. I'll be happier. I'll feel more seen. I'll feel more powerful. But guess what? That didn't happen. So anyway, there I am back at the gym trying to figure it out. Got a job like just freelancing as well, making some money on the side. And I met this girl, and we sort of sat down one day and just really hit it off. Her family were very, very influenced as business owners. And we were 22. I think I was 23 at the time, 24. We basically sat there and we just thought, let's start a business. And she was heavily influenced by property in her family. So that sort of, I guess, came through a little. And then we just sat down and was like, you know what, there's not a lot of professional shared housing in Kent, which is where I live. It was very common in London, but it wasn't so much in Kent. And so, yeah, a long story short, from 2015 to 2020, I built that company. And I built it with her. We built it with nothing. And you can imagine, Mel faced every avenue of being like with ageism, with sexism, like in property, you know, like in hindsight as well, when I look back, everybody we employed was all male, other than our cleaners, and somebody who worked as an assistant for us. But again, it's sort of, well, you know, you don't want to validate the system, but it sort of was happening like that because it was just what was presented to us. And even just the way that we got used to the way we were spoke to, and what we had to tackle and sort of divert around, and sort of, you know, in toxic masculine environments, we were so clever and assertive. And I think this is the thing about the feminine energy at the forefront. We were so clever that we almost used to know we had to stroke their egos to be able to prove what we knew that we could do as a business. So we navigated all of that and built it all, very, very proud. You know, over time we got to like 100 tenants. We definitely turned around 100 tenants in time. We were still directing, well, I wasn't directing another company. Laura was, she was working on a different company too, and I was, because we were both still trying to earn money. Again, very naive in business, and just full of passion and fire. We were the last ones to pay ourselves, you know, like, and it was like that. And even when we were bringing in 6-figure revenue, which in total over the time of the 5 years, it would have been up to 7, like as in the total look at the whole thing. But I just was unhappy, Mel. And it was funny because it got to the end of 2019 and my business partner was pregnant. And I remember her sort of having a big conversation with me saying, I don't know if I want to do this after having a baby. I don't know. And we really, like, it was really hard. And can you imagine my ego, that little girl who wanted to be that powerful man and everything else? It was just like hurting. It was so torn. It was so punched in the face. I was like, who the hell am I going to be without this business owner title? But what I also understood, and some of my really close friends at the time, very careful on my ego, were like, Laura, like, you don't really want to turn up sometimes. And honestly, Mel, I thought, oh my God, this is so true. You know, why am I doing all of this for all of the pressure and all the responsibility of a founder or director? And we had tons of responsibilities in a legal sense as well, around tenancy law, around everything, you know, people's health and mind and every wellness, and, you know, and then the other side of stuff with contracts, legals and landlords and so on. And in between this space, in like 2018, I bought a professional camera for the first time. And I just sort of started going out with it. I used to be in London a lot in the sales job, and I used to just experiment and have everything on manual, and I just learned how to shoot with different types of lighting, I think, there. And then because I loved photography and I was really getting into it, I was trying to find what I wanted to shoot, and I love shooting women. I loved empowering them. And that's where I was like, and that, but again, where we're not taught that at school, we're meant to go out to work to earn money. I was just enjoying this. It was such flow for me, what I call and teach flow now. It was just so intrinsic. It wasn't like, you know, there was nothing there. And so I was, at the time, it's crazy when I look back, I was managing the business, pulling in money in the sales job too, and then tutoring wherever I could. And I was very, very grateful that an opportunity I met two ladies that had founded a business that were working with influencers at the time. And so for free, they offered me to go on a trip and be able to shoot on behalf of brands and do some stuff for influencers. So that's sort of where that was born, really. And that was where that was coming to life. But obviously, the business had a lot of responsibility. There was a lot going on. But at the back end of 2019, I then made a decision with my business partner that we would sell the company. That was it. We packaged it. We then had to learn how to sell a company. We basically, that in itself is crazy. Like, even just dealing with people who are interested, you know, going through them, they want to audit you, they want to audit everything with a fine, of course, as well, in an understandable form. They want to then look at all of our tenancies. They want to go into every room, which obviously requires legal notice, things like that. They want to then audit your accountant and everything else. So it was back and forth. And anyway, we were right at the end, Mel, right at the end. And then guess what? The pandemic hit.
Yeah.
COVID set in, and he just pulled out, you know, and so we just sort of, you know, put our pens down and tried to breathe through a pandemic, tried to manage that as much as we could. And then, you know, it was sort of like, and then that was when I had my time. And again, I'm very grateful, as much as there's been so much horrific pain through this pandemic for people who have lost close members of their family, or, you know, have had gone through their own pain and their own journey. For me at the time, it made me still, Mel. For the first time in years, I was still, and I could think, okay, what is this? And I loved, beyond, as I was growing all this business, I always knew that was for the collective. It started obviously thinking I was going to be famous, but I always knew I was for the collective. Like, I love to help others. I love to help on the masses. Whenever I got opportunity to support other people in their businesses, I loved it. Even at the property company, like, me and Laura laugh now because we're still great friends. She says, I remember when you were like wanting to do a YouTube channel with it, because I always wanted to help, always wanted to mentor and bring to life what we were doing, and almost like give the tools to that younger woman and that younger person, to be honest, to just go, you can do anything, you really can. And, like, you know, just try. It's not about looking at the whole mountain, it's just the next step, it's just one thing at a time. Like, there's, you know, and just try, and so on. And so, yeah, I just sort of found peace with what I was trying to be and do. And then, you know, I had a lot of close friends, and a lot of people reach to me and say, you make everything make sense to me. You mentor me through crazy times that never make sense. And just the way you say it in your visuals and your analogies, it just brings truth to my life. And I've sat on it, and I'm so grateful for that. And I actually reached out to an old lady I worked with in property years ago, who was a friend as well. And she was a mentor for women at the time. And I just said, I think I need you. And she went, what do you need? What you just built? No, you don't. All this stuff. And I went, no, I do. I think I need you for accountability. I'm doing this on my own this time. And I'm trying to figure out what it is that's next for me. and I knew it wasn't the property business. I knew I wanted a business. I loved my photography, and I just didn't know how it all mapped together. And at this point too, myself and my business partner, we actually agreed to seize the company and basically cut ties with it and lose out, because to repackage and to sell a company, it's about 6 months of work once you've got an interested buyer. And I didn't want to part with my time anymore. I couldn't, Mel. It was just too much. And for her, it was. And I truly knew, and I've always known this, that I'll be abundant forever. Like I was like, I'm not frightened. I'll make money in a different way. Like, this is learnings, but I just need to cut with this now. So we done everything in the most legal sense that we could do, you know. And all the landlords were grateful because they had business like that was already set up, that was working in their houses. We'd invested a lot into them to making them the way that they were, and so on. That's why the contracts had value, and that's why they were worth money. But yeah, and we were very savvy in the company. The balance sheet wasn't, you know, too unhealthy, so we didn't completely walk away with nothing. But it just wasn't, you know, the greatest of outcomes, I guess, if you look at it from a financial point. But it was the best decision I ever made. Enrolled with my mentor, and straight up she was like, "You're a mentor, Laura, and actually you're just enough with who you are and how you're showing up right now." And it's the first time in my life where I stopped looking out, where I stopped looking at how do you get what that powerful person's got, how do you get that wealth, how do I take control, that when I get that, I'll be this, and then I can have the husband that fits, and then I'll have the child that fits, because I'll have the financial freedom to do it how I want to do it. Like, for the first time now, I realized the age of 30, I was like, yeah, no, life doesn't really work like that. And actually also it's quite an easy way of doing it as well. And there is where I really started to listen to my heart, my higher self. I've done a lot of unpacking, as you can imagine, as I've analysed everything, that I really realised what was going on when I was a lot younger, what happened to me in a performing environment and stuff, and just the way the world is at the minute, and what I was sort of validating in the toxic traits of what happens. And yeah, so at that point I was so grateful and privileged, and that's where my mentoring journey started. And I've been the most prosperous I've ever been in my life. I have the most happiness, the most truest, like, authentic fulfillment that I've ever had. And I have the grace and like space to help build other women's businesses. And every day, I promise you, Mel, it's like I feel like I'm tricking life. I'm like, how is it this easy? And this is, all of us have this. All of us have something. I truly believe that, you know, it does look different for everyone, and it might come at different points in your life. But I think it's unpacking society, our curriculum, our limitations, the expectation, the trauma where somebody's maybe bullied you in your life or said something you're not enough in your life. It's unpacking all of that and then figuring out what that inner child just is and is passionate at, and truly believing that there is wealth there. You just have to work from that place and trust that that's the byproduct, as opposed to going out to make it. And yeah, and I'm very grateful that photography just fits. It just ties in, because it all is a part of who I am and what I do. And now I'm very grateful. But whenever brands reach out, or whenever I'm working with a client, it's only from a space where I truly believe the authentic message is the same as mine. So it will be me taking work or campaigns to be able to lift women and to inspire and to ensure that I really always try to do a good job of making sure that everybody looks like they are seen in an image. And every woman that's watching it, whether they're black, brown, you know, and disabled, larger, skinnier, they feel they're seen. Like, and I always encourage brands to understand that, and for critical change as opposed to following trends. And yeah, and that is what I feel truly aligned for. It feels like it's my soul purpose, which is such a crazy thing to say, but it just makes sense, Mel. And yeah, I'm sorry to like give that quite a long-winded version there, but I guess it's the truth. And that's where I am today. So yeah, here I am.
Wow.
Thank you. That's so kind. It's just my story.
I know, but I mean, you've heard this before, I'm sure. Your energy, your enthusiasm, your You are so articulate. And I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you, and please, this is a compliment. When at parts when you were talking, you reminded me of Russell Brand.
Oh, do you know that no one said it, but I love that. And do you know what's really funny is that from a young age I have had like you've got very strong energy, and I don't think I ever knew how to place that when I was younger. I was like, oh, okay, thank you, and so on, and probably comes from being very very comfortable being put in just an unknown situation. Like I feel the most comfortable there, which is for some people that feels very strange. I just think I was very grateful that at a young age I was put on stages because I wanted to be there. So, if I've sung in front of loads of people, which I'm not so great at, I'm sure just to be myself and just talk isn't as difficult. And I completely understand that would fulfill like that for others. But thank you so much, because I definitely find that a massive compliment. I love watching him. I think he's very engaging.
Yeah, me too. I love the fact that he fights against the establishment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, rock on. That's showing my age, isn't it?
I love it.
So, okay, I mean, there are so many different pathways you've taken. There are so many things I could question you on. In terms of the one thing that did stick out to me, especially with what's happening, or certainly been happening, or certainly come to the limelight in the last few years, and certainly the story that's hitting the headlines at the moment with Prince Andrew. You talked about the the sexualism and what was happening when you were a model. Is that, without talk about what you want or not, but in terms of, I've been down a million rabbit holes in the last couple of years in terms of what's going on in the world, what's really going on in the world. And I've woken up to some horrific truths that have been going on under our noses, and it's been very well hidden. And a lot of it is to do with trafficking and human trafficking, child trafficking, and all the rest of it. So I was just quite interested when you were talking about how you felt in those rooms, and how there was almost a jealousy from other women if they weren't getting that kind of attention, which is just bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
heartbreaking.
yeah, because like you said, we, especially like the way magazines are glamorized and everybody's filtered, and you've got to have a cleavage, and you've got to have the perfect teeth, and you've got to have this, and you've got to have that. And the way society's gone in the last, well, God knows how many decades, women have been looking at the extrinsic, as you call it, the looking good, the false hair, the false whatever, to make them look as pretty as somebody else. And if they don't get that attention, then they're not worth anything. So just, I suppose, long-winded way of asking, a bit more about that situation for you, and was it a hard time for you, or were you in that sort of position where you were just like, well, up yours, and you sort of were able to whack it off?
Do you know what, Mel? It's really weird because I feel like you can't talk about privilege and the bad ship, if that's a word, because I'm not that clever with words. I try and learn.
Wow.
I don't know if that is. I don't know if it's a word. I might have just made it up. But with basically the negativity of privilege, there is also positivity. And the thing is I think that's the space where I feel like if we're doing good work in the world, and giving good spaces and educating as opposed to shaming, pretty privilege, if we want to call it that. And I do believe it is that. And I've understood that, in a younger form, being sexualized, and having skinny privilege, white privilege, this Western privilege. The thing is you do get a free drink and you do get an upgrade, Mel, and people do welcome you around the world, wherever, and people don't cross the road and feel frightened of you like they might if you were black with a hood on,
Yeah.
down across the road, or they would feel more comfortable to walk next to you, and so on. So I think it's not fair to talk about the negative without the positive, and that goes hand in hand with a lot, I'm sure, of the opportunities I was given, and I think women also are very, very intuitive, in that feminine energy. And I believe, like, for us to evolve fully in a really ideal great world, it is the balance of the female and the masculine energy, because again, like, there's another unpacking with men, but if they feel naturally feminine, they're also feeling like they can't do that in this world, because they are also taught to be, the one that makes the decisions and the one that provides and the one that, is the secure one, and he doesn't get emotional. And we're moving through it, but I am still aware that that is the biggest bracket of deaths for men is suicide still. In the UK. I believe it's from the ages of like 25 to 35, I think, or I could be wrong on that, it could be slightly different, but it's scary. And I think this is the thing about, again, the stigma against the feminism, because and the feminist, it's like, it's not about, women aren't great and we're not heard, we're not seen, and we want this, we want that, and we want all these things. It's about both things evolving, and actually it will be a beneficial thing for a man as well. But sorry, getting back round, because I feel like I've gone off topic a little. There is amazing things about the privilege of those attributes. But what it did for me, Mel, is it stripped me from who I am. Because what starts to happen is, it's like the gaslighting effect, like the narcissistic process of, if somebody says to you enough, you're, like, you're skinny, or like, you've got a great body, 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 or you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. There comes a point where you don't think you're anything else. I promise you, it's crazy. So, and I've had some really, like, open, vulnerable, and I'm really grateful for their space, but chats with friends that are like Western, super privileged, like pretty, as in, like, as you say, like literally looking like that airbrushed picture, which is the desirable image within our Western beauty culture, and the capitalism of advertising. But it's scary, because the problem with that is that there becomes a point where you start questioning who you are without that. And so that's the scary factor. And going back to those rooms and those other women that were around me, I think, again, I'm sure from a very, very good, strong, provided for upbringing in my family, and just a sense of a strong identity from a young girl, as much as it did hurt, like, as in, I it made me feel lost, because so many people said it all the time. So it was that feeling of going, okay, then you start thinking it yourself. You're like, well, I am that. Okay, what does that mean for me? It means I get this. It means that people like me. It means that men like me. But you're always questioning why. You're questioning why you've got the job, and then you're trying to then play the system, because in your mind you think, oh, well, if I just sort of like adhere to their masculine ego, I'll then go in, do a great job, and then that's how I get in, because then other people will give me the job, because then I'll be seen for my brain. And you see how it's such a complex way of it. It's like coding. It's like you have to keep moving of who you are to try and map this world, as opposed to feeling safe in a space where you can just out this. And I think this is it. Like, Emma Thompson she done a beautiful interview, but it was talking actually around the stuff that's gone on with Prince Andrew. And she just sort of says, like, the power shift is still not equalized. And this is the problem. Like, even with all the work that we're doing, when you root out the problem, that power shift is still far too unbalanced with women and men in just as that, in an isolated chat, in just that industry, that alone. That's where we still have a big problem, because at what point are you heard, or at what point do you feel safe to be honest, or do you think your career will be taken away? Because the reality of it now, and this is the scary stuff out there, the reason why I think those other girls maybe felt that way is because they didn't have a strong connection to identity as much as me. So they just sort of was stirring, and they were like being led, and they just thought, well, that's it. They were so validated by that constant probably push of who they are and what they are and what they've got to do, being sexualized, objectified and stuff. It is that, it becomes that. And so and also there's not safe spaces, and I did see, and I do know that when you do these things, or when that does happen, you do get the job. You get it. So you do get the job. you know. And that's the craziest thing about this. And then it's very hard and tough, because then, you know, there can be a lot of women who feel very insecure, and they almost feel like, to be heard, they'd rather be in the patriarchy gang, the misogyny gang. Do you know what I mean by that? Then they're not. It's like that whole like culture, going back to the Mean Girls. It's like, I'd rather be in the Mean Girls hating life than not be in it at all. So then you'll get a lot of wives that just sort of validate it, because they think that that's what their job is, and actually that's what is the exchange for a lovely life in money, materialistic terms, and so on. And so I think it's very complex. It's a lot to unpack, but yeah, I mean, that's a bit more information in terms of that environment and what I can see and from being in it, and my perspective on it in my lived experience, and probably possibly from those others that were there too.
Mm. Yeah, that's really insightful. Because, you know, I'm probably more the masculine energy than the feminine energy. I've always been ambitious and all of that, and very much like you know, more Teflon. I'm not going to let insecurity. I'm not saying I wasn't insecure. I still have my insecurities now, but much less so than some people I know and some friends, etc. And I've always, I suppose, not struggled, but just wondered how it gets to that level. And you've just described it perfectly, especially in that industry, because, you know, especially modeling, it's all about how you look and what your body's like and all of that, of course. But then it continues, and it probably started from a, you know, from a younger age in terms of their upbringing or whatever, but then it continues into the marriage, or it continues into whatever, and that's their life.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
really, really fucking sad, isn't it? And
Yeah, it's really sad. And it's why I'm so passionate about young women and just having the tools to understand what privilege is, to understand how it can help you, to understand what it serves for you, but actually understand how you say yes and no, and understanding boundaries at a younger age. I think, again, it is like, as you say, it's that feminine energy, and just, you know, the grass that we were placed on when we were born. And, you know, women had it a much tougher hundreds of years ago and so on. So we're definitely always progressing, but it doesn't make it okay.
mm,
And it's about how, instead of keep like, you know, doing this cancel culture or shaming people, it's about giving people space to feel, you know, to maybe blame in certain situations, but also like to then re-educate, because shaming doesn't get us anywhere. It just makes people feel caged again, oppressed again, and they can't even ask why something was said to them that made them feel such a thing, and how maybe there was a deaf tone in terms of what they were saying or being. And I think this is the thing, isn't it? It is hard. And also, as well, I think we're learning, and there's a lot of evidence now, like, you know, there's some great people at the forefront that's leading it. But even listening to Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle, I was listening to the other day, she's a lovely advocate for women and energy and understanding the feminine and the masculine. And I think this is where we are evolving. And it's a little bit like leading off from what you were just talking about, Mel. It's the understanding that actually, when we place an outward feminine energy in the way that we lead, it gets insane results. Insane results. Like when we are vulnerable, when we show vulnerability as a leader, guess what? It allows our team to be vulnerable. It gives a good space for this non-performative crap to evolve. You know, we go in masculine in a toxic form, like, I want results. Why aren't we getting results? We need to hit action. Guess what? Everyone feels that they cannot be vulnerable, they cannot be feminine in their outward movement. And guess what? They're just going to show up, be performative, but you're never going to get them the best out of people. You know, and the last forefront is your business. So the business is going to suffer too. And I think that's the biggest thing I'm learning as a leader is actually, like, the most articulate skill we can learn as good leaders is listening.
mm,
And it's so mad, because we think we've all cracked that down, and I think we underestimate how simple it feels and is, but it isn't. And I think it starts with the unpacking of what that is, and as I say, like, you know, moving forward with an outward feminine energy where you show that as a leader. And, you know, when shit hits the fan in a business, when you show kindness as opposed to trying to find action or blaming and shaming, um people just feel heard and seen as humans. And that's it. That's the best, that is the best way that we can get the best out of anything. And I think it goes for the same in relationships, you know, like it all comes back to that communication, doesn't it? And actually I think that is why the feminine energy is so underestimated, and it's such a strength. And I think it's coming. We're starting to get it. Like I even see, like, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk as a quite a big dominant male leader, as a business owner and on social media and content. He's very feminine in his outward ways. And, you know, like I don't know him, so I don't know how much, you know, that is just what he's showing up as, or if he is that every day. But I mean, all of the content I see is very much like that. And we can all be masculine, but it's understanding, and I feel like we should always be both, but it's understanding, like, I think when we're doing it out of a toxic sense, that's like what you said, like as a woman, like it's us trying to figure out, you know, are we going into this meeting that's with another 9 men with outward masculine traits because we've been gaslit for our feminine our whole life. You know, it goes back to that whole thing of, you know, if you saw a director in his desk and he had his children up, he's kind and he's approachable. If you saw a woman, she's emotional, she's weak.
Yeah.
You know, so it goes back to that whole simple concept. And so I think that's where we have to be brave enough as women and be okay with like moving forward in that energy and just working through with our results. And that's why it's a complex thing, and it's a lot of unpacking, you know, and that's what I recognized in myself, you know, for years in business, like, and for years in my life, I moved with that very like sarcastic outward, you know, I'm the achiever, I'm a hustler, I'm this, I'm that, like I'm like, as opposed to like that energy that said, do you know what, I'm really struggling today, and I'm really struggling, and I feel this feeling of burnout, but I feel vulnerable to stop because I feel like that means I'm failing. You know, like I think they're the conversations where I really constantly want to put out for others to feel heard and seen. And I think that's the thing too. It's like, again, it all goes hand in hand with this idea of happiness and how we're outwardly looking for it. Because when you see them people show up like that, it creates this copy culture, doesn't it? You just think, well, you have to be that, or you have to shop like that, or actually to have a successful business, I need to be up at 5 a.m. And I certainly don't, Mel. That is not flow for me. And it is for some people, but it isn't for me. And I used to feel shame around that. I used to think, oh, bloody hell, I don't ever really book in a meeting till 10. But now I don't, because I have nothing to feel shame around, because my results are my results. So I know it works for me. But, you know, I was always constantly chasing something that I thought was meant to be and how it was meant to look and so on. So yeah, that's what I'm really passionate about and sharing and speaking more about openly.
Well, just listening to you then, a shameless plug from me. The episode that got published on my podcast this week is a wonderful woman called Na. She's got 3 surnames, and they all begin with A, and it's, oh my God, Na Amelie something. Sorry, Na, if you're listening. But she's basically running to be the first female president of Ghana in 2024. She's
oh, how incredible.
Yeah, she's UK born, but she's Ghana heritage. And listening to the story of how it came about is incredibly divine, inspirational, spiritual, and everything else. And just listening to you talking about the female masculine, which was happening on the last podcast interview I did earlier today as well. Yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd get a lot out of that.
Oh, I really would. Thank you so much. No, I'll definitely listen to that. I mean, any woman that feels she can take on like a country is, I think, incredible anyway, because Jesus, there's even more to unpack there, isn't it? And again, for me, you know, like I'm on my journey and I'm moving forward, and I am here I want to really reach and support so many women, but how I mentor is bespokely. So at the minute, I truly believe that, you know, and I'm sure you can gain from just my lived experience and me working out of my knowledge and just who I am, is that I truly believe we all require something different. And so all of my mentoring is all bespoke one-to-one. And I really tried to set up an academy last year to cater for more, because I had these discovery calls, and it's a reflection in people's investment too. So I wanted to cater for more, but it just didn't work, Mel. And that's what I mean. And I think that's why it's an incredible position to and so credible to be able to feel that you can go into parliament, because at that point it's not about the individual, you're trying to juggle for the collective.
Yeah, represent.
And that's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard, you know,
definitely.
that's a hard job because someone's always going to lose.
Well,
So
yeah,
it's hard.
I mean, it's been governed by men, as you can imagine, for a long time.
And that in itself, geez. But that's incredible. No, I'd love to listen to her. She sounds amazing now.
She is. So how did, obviously, the property thing, you know, you'd had enough. Unfortunately, you never got to sell the business. I'm assuming that you were sort of doing a rent to rent thing.
Yeah, there you go, Mel. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, again, we started with no capital. So, you know, we actually borrowed money. We borrowed money, which is ironic, to get a mentor, which is where I met where I met my mentor now.
Yeah.
And back in the day, that was 2014. We started that, and it's because we always wanted to be by the book. We're both very, you know, have that in common. We love to learn, and we knew that this was a, like, honestly, in reflection now, I think, what was we thinking? Like one of the most like hardest businesses to tackle, and just even from like a logistics point of view, you know what I mean, like even the fact that we were going in, we've never owned a property, never had a property, we're two young women, and we've got no shop front, and there we are, like we're going against big agents, like we are like battling on contracts, and at that point we wasn't even asking for 12 months, we were asking for 3 or 4 years, because as Mel said, the concept of understanding what rent to rent is, or let to rent in the property world, what it's known for, is basically you having a management agreement with a landlord. And the way we set up is we offered them a guaranteed rent every month, which is what landlords liked. And then we basically made our margin by letting out each room. But then there was thousands of investment from us on the forefront, because we always took pride in ourselves that everything was regulation standards and more. And you would think that's normal, Mel, but you'd be shocked at the amount of houses we got called to or asked to go and see that had nothing, you know, and the tenants were so vulnerable in there, like as in just lots of staple stuff that you require. It's almost setting up like a commercial let, really, like, you know, fire panels, like fire points, and, you know, just so much, the signage, like fire doors, lots of stuff. Like in one house we even needed a sprinkler system, like it was just crazy. But yes, that was amazing, amazing experience, and everything makes sense, Mel, because I never would have been where I am without that. But yeah, absolutely, that is what our business model was.
Yeah.
And yeah, we grew it, and I am, you know, I'm very proud of what we did. We're so proud of each other, and you know what we were doing, and the challenges we faced, and yeah, and just navigating this world, I guess.
So obviously you sort of let go, you know, it was so hard work with that buyer that unfortunately COVID hit and it never happened. And then you just had the peace and the wisdom, by the sounds of it, to let it go. How you talked about your mentor, and your mentor was the one that said to you, you need to be a mentor. Do you think without that conversation you'd be doing what you're doing? Maybe you would, because you seem like an absolute natural to me anyway. So but also, how did you transition from property photography to all of a sudden finding women, and you're going to 10 million women or more? How did that happen, and where did these women come from?
Well, it basically, sorry, to answer your first question, Mel, I do think I would be doing this
Yeah.
because it feels so divine, and that sounds so mad because some of the language I talk in, never had it in my life. You know, I was like a strict atheist. I was like, no, and as well, I don't actually believe in God anymore still, and I don't believe in you know, I don't believe in a religion. But do I believe in universal work? I absolutely do. Learning about quantum physics, and I truly believe I've quantum jumped, like to be able to visualize, manifest, and I do it with my clients. And there's a lot around it, but I think again it's kind of like a big there's been a lot of selling around it, so it almost feels a bit like a wizardry thing to a lot of people, like law of attraction and all of that stuff. But there's just so much like sense in it when you get into it, and you know, and a lot of people do it without even realizing. But it's but yeah, I definitely think I would have 100% got there. Do I think I would have done it as quickly without her? No. Do I think I would have been able to stand in my power, my worth, and unpack the way that I did without her? No. And I don't think I would be able to have been attracting the wealth I did as quick as I can without her. Because the thing that I had, and I had to cross over to, Mel, is I always knew I could build businesses, But I lacked, believe it or not, I mean, I know I'm very outwardly confident, but I lacked belief in myself that I was deserving. You know, like even when I said to you, we were the last to be paid in our company, and at times weren't, you know, and that was it. And I think that's where, for the first time, understanding that I was enough, and actually what I was doing and how I was navigating forward was a massive value to others. It took me time to get my head around that. I was like, yeah, but I'm just being me.
Yeah.
These are conversations I give away for free. And then I started to learn about energy exchange. And what I mean by that is, it's like understanding, like, we almost see it in businesses when you have that existential crisis. It's what we require as human beings changes at every point in our life. What business requires changes, and it grows. So for instance, in 2018, I was very grateful to get a job where I wasn't paid in photography, because I was learning. You see, so the energy exchange was me learning, and me being given space to be able to learn and be in my gifts and like learn that. But guess what? As 2019 hits, if you're still doing it like that, people associate the energy exchange with the common feeling of thinking, oh, I just can't be bothered, or I don't enjoy it as much, I'm not so passionate about it anymore, or it's just getting a bit much, or I feel a bit resentful for it, or I just don't really want to show up today. No, it isn't. That I identify that very, very quickly when I'm mentoring people, and I sit and they come to me on discovery calls. I can figure out if it is truly intrinsic, or I can figure out, actually, we just need to energy shift them. And the thing is that is a lot to do with the person. So what I mean in that moment is, actually, if I then offered that person the same week, but actually every day you get paid £1,000, you see, that's an energy exchange. But we all have a weird concept about money. You know, can be a bit taboo. You don't talk about those things, but actually it's just energy. It's just movement, but we attach an emotional science to it, because we see what it can get us, or we can see what it gets us. And if I say this is how much it costs, someone thinks, well, that's my rent. So they're not thinking about that as a tool at that point. They're thinking about the fear. So sometimes I just really have to unpack someone for a little while around their money mindset and around, you know, and I see all of this. And so it really is like an inside job. And as I say, that moves all the time, because it's about you. You know, it could actually be that the energy exchange is that you get less money, but I can only, for me, my body and what I like to do now and who I am now, I only want to be working 4 days a week. So how does that shift? Do you see what I mean? And maybe I have to mentor, figure out how we get that in this amount of space, or maybe it is the energy imbalance in how they're showing up. They're doing so much, and that was okay when they were 20, but it's not okay at 25. So I just need to work out how we get support. And you see, it's a different energy exchange. So that's what I would say I understood straight up, and she shifted out in me. Because, as I say, I was in like level 2 mindset fully, whereas that hustler, I was an overachiever. I just thought I had to work 12 hours a day, every day. And then I would like let out steam and like just leave the country for 3 days, turn everything off, then come back. And yeah, and so when I started to understand the value of what I could just do, just not overworking, I was like, are you crazy? This is mad. And I never underestimate the amount of money that people invest in me. But after now doing it for a year and seeing the results that I can get with people, and then reinvesting in someone, which I'm always so grateful for, if I feel I can still help them more in their journey, I never underestimate that. It's a lot of money, but I also see the ROI in it now fully. So I do get that in my gifts now. And it's taken time, really time, to build that in.
And where do these women come from? You know, because you know, you started a new business again.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Well, do you know what, Mel? Again, I think it all goes back to the intrinsic stuff. Like, if it just is you just have to show up as you. So at the time, I had my photography Instagram. And I think I'd about, do you know what, Mel? I'm so sorry. I'm just going to plug you in. Is that okay? Sorry, listeners. I am still with you, but I don't want to lose you. And this is my fault, right? We all learn. It's all learnings. But I should have plugged you in before, because I've just seen my batteries getting low.
No problem.
But I'm still with you. So yeah, going back to that, I at the point, it was all from Instagram, pretty much. And I think I realized, obviously quite quickly, just through, having a lot of skill around, I had a lot of natural skill around selling, around marketing, because I'd done all that in the business. So I sort of knew that aspect of stuff. And I just knew that I had to reach out. I knew that I had to be present. I knew that if I wanted to find these divine clients and these ladies, I had to talk my truth, and sort of start showing up. So I would do sort of small clips and videos on Instagram. And God, that took time, because that was the most vulnerable river I could ever describe. It was like someone threw me off a cliff. I was like, are you mad? Why do people want to listen to me? This is cringe. Like, I'm just talking a load of crap that I spilled down the pub to 4 other people. And over time I got more articulate, and over time I listened to that intuition. I could like unravel that wisdom, and it's there, and it would just come. And then like people would be in front of me, and I knew I would be like, we need to adjust this in your business, and this will, and like we just got incredible results. And I was just so grateful for that trust and for the platform. And at the time as well, it was sort of going hand in hand with photography. So to begin with, my packages included a day of me shooting too, because it was quite relevant with some businesses. And then what I realized was, again, my energy exchange shifted again. So I knew that at that point, I needed to, it just wasn't included, and that was an additional if people wanted that, because I think I was believing in my gifts more as just a mentor. And that sort of brought me really to today, and I'm just so grateful, and just little things as well, and going back to like, being very grateful to be working with my mentor, and just again, sort of old habits and understandings of like marketing strategy from the past, when I was building another business, because we had no budget. And that's and I honestly believe as well, it's crazy, like when you level up in a company, when I see small businesses going bigger, the biggest thing they think they need is people, time, or money. And half the time it isn't, none of those. They don't know what they want at that point. They're lost in why they're showing up, or their vision. Until we really know the strong goals we're hitting, we don't know what we need. But you sort of like, they've basically grown, and they feel fear because it's the next river. So, it's a bit different when you're gambling £100 to £1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000. And that's all about training that muscle. And that's why, it's just so incredibly amazing to be a mentor and to have a mentor, because I see the value in it. And she has a mentor, and this is the thing, it's like, and we're all on different growth journeys for different things, but I think it all comes back down to that masculine energy again. It feels like you're failing if you're asking for help, or it feels like you're failing, or you're not good enough or know enough if you're not figuring it all out on your own, or looking like, well, why do I need any help when I've figured this out so far and done this? But again, I truly believe, I see it, and I knew it in myself. We all have a ceiling. We all have our own limitations, all of us, from whatever we've been shown in our lives, whatever we've achieved so far. Like, some people could sit in a room and say, I think you're doing all right, and it's quite difficult to earn 50k a year. And some people could go, I think you're doing all right, and it's quite difficult to earn £250,000 a year. And they generally could feel the same feelings. Again, money's just a number. It's just a digital thing. It's just an energy, but it's the way we see it and understand it. And that takes time. It takes time to nurture that muscle. And it's funny. I was watching something the other day, and I can't remember who it was, but they were describing how most people that get rich quick lose it quick, because they haven't trained that muscle. They don't know how to maneuver it. They're too emotionally attached to it. They don't know how to, and that's the thing. And so I never underestimate that. But I always know as well, if someone's really willing to invest, they're also ready, Mel. They're ready. They are ready to be vulnerable. They're ready to take action. They're ready to listen. And I always say it's like a river of vulnerability. I always say that I truly believe in our lifetime, we sort of go down to this riverbank, and it's quite nice there, and you can do nice things and sit there with friends, you can meet different people, you can experience joy and happiness. But I almost feel like it's always, most human beings looked at the other side of the riverbank, and they can see something that just in their dream or in their heart, or something that they desire to do or to be or to have. And we do this cognitive dissonance thing where we almost convince ourselves, we're like, oh well, it's too many of them, or well, I won't be able to do that because probably like, I couldn't afford it and other people can, and you'd have to train so much to be that, or like I probably just wouldn't be very good at it, or why would people want to listen to me, and all that. And basically what that is the river in between. It's like the unknown, fear, scarcity, like imposter syndrome, trauma. It's all of that in the middle. And I always say, as a mentor, I sit in the river. I sit in it. I'm in it, and I'm going, right, get in, get your leg in. And I can't swim it for you. You have to swim, but you have to trust also in how I'm steering you. And it's funny because my clients get that now. So I remember saying to one of them a few weeks back, I remember saying, look, you're doing a great job, but right now only your toes in, and I need your leg in. And they get it. They get it because they know what they're holding back on. And it's just so beautiful when people trust and they dive in, and they're always all right. Normally we're always okay, you know. It's crazy how much our mind limits us. And it's there to protect us, isn't it? It's the ego, is that it's there as protection, but a lot of it is full of fake news and stuff that doesn't serve us. And I think, yeah, that's it. But again, it's up to the individual. That's another thing I've learned massively last year. You know, you can't fix people. There's a difference between fixing and mentoring, and that makes a good mentor, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you for that. I might use that analogy myself.
No, you can.
So Laura, if anybody wanted to work with you, where would they find you? What's the easiest way to get in touch?
So Mel, I would say laurabelcher.com. So that's my full name.com. That's my website. It's my core hub at the minute. And me and my assistant, we're working really hard to put more valuable stuff on there, to put all my podcast appearances and bits and pieces on there. Also, there's free masterclasses you can download. So I always try and do one every quarter where I do an hour of really valuable information that I really try and pack in to as a you know, to give back, because I'm very grateful for people's support and people who follow me. And if people have discovery calls and they're not in a financial place right now to invest, but they are so connected or resonate with what I'm saying or what I'm doing, I'm grateful to be able to give that space. So there's a few on there that you can literally just click and download. The only thing I ask for you is your email, so it sends you the link to it, and that's it. You can watch it. And there's I've got how to tackle imposter syndrome on there. I've done a masterclass from that one. How to build a 6-figure business in a simple form. In an hour, not quite. You can't think you can quite do it in an hour, but there's an hour's info on there. And then my last one that I put up, I'm trying to think, because I did have I had a bit of a crazy year last year, so there's only 3 on there, and the third one is scaling. So and the reason why I do this, and when it comes to me, and this is why I try and keep it organic too, again, because I try and always be in flow. Don't want to force them out, right? If they're not sitting there, if nothing's coming. But it was a time where so many people were coming to me for advice. I was having so many discovery calls with that small to big business jump. And it was just coming up with so many of the most similar setbacks or hurdles, and I just felt compelled to do an hour of it. So yeah, they're on there. But yeah, that's the best way. And then there is an option that if you do want to, if you feel connected to me and you feel like you'd like to talk to me more, you can book a 30-minute free call with me. And I'm always very, very grateful to be in anybody's space and have a chat. And I'm very chilled, as you can imagine. You know, you'll normally meet me with a coffee, a cup of tea, or a wine. Pretty much it. But yeah, so that's it, pretty much my hub, I'd say.
All right, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I will put it in the show notes, obviously. Okay, so I like to close these conversations with anything you feel drawn to say to the listeners, anything at all.
Just don't overcomplicate what you feel and think. And really, really, if you're stuck in thoughts, just know that that is a collective place of our consciousness. Our morals and our beliefs are just collective thoughts that we've been seeing, that's we're saying or we're thinking because we've seen it or we've been around it. But you are limitless, you can do anything. Just work through that heart, really, really ground yourself, and just think about, when I say that, like, again, I sound very spiritual, and I am, but like, I don't want it to sound like that, and people miss that opportunity to find that for themselves, but for it to make sense to them. But to just lay in your own peace, or just whatever makes you feel what we call in a high vibration. So that's either, you know, whatever it is for you, like listening to your favorite music, or being with a glass of wine, or sitting with your dog, or being out with your friends, or when you're driving in the car and you're driving somewhere where you don't really want to be, really, really take that time to just really try to shut down the mind, the thoughts, and think from your heart. And sometimes that isn't a thought, it's just a feeling. But don't doubt it. Intuition is super powerful, and everything you need is within you. It really is.
Nice. Yeah, you're speaking from my heart as well there. So thank you, Laura. It has been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, and I'm so grateful for these opportunities, because without amazing women like you, I wouldn't be able to come on and share my wisdom and experience either. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful weekend, because it's Friday
You're
afternoon.
welcome. Absolutely. And to your listeners, I hope you all have a lovely weekend.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.